elected to a second term. After his service as district attorney, he returned to the firm of Sparks Dix PC as senior counsel in charge of the firm's litigation section. In 1999, he was appointed by Governor Bill Owens as the executive director of the Colorado Department of Corrections, where he headed the correctional system. In 2001, Mr. Suthers was nominated by President George W. Bush to be a United States Attorney for the District of Colorado. He was unanimously confirmed to the United States Senate and represented the United States in all criminal and civil matters within the District of Colorado. In 2005, he was appointed Attorney General of Colorado, and in 2006, he won the election to the office of the Attorney General by a large margin. As Attorney General, he represents and defends the interests of the people of Colorado and is Chief Legal Counsel and advisor to the state government and state agencies, boards, and commissions. In his current position, he has initiated successful programs to protect children from internet predators and to reduce mortgage and foreclosure fraud. He chairs the statewide methamphetamine task force and serves as the co-chair of the Criminal Law Committee for the National Association of Attorneys General and is a member of the U.S. Attorney General's Executive Working Group. Please help me welcome Mr. Don Suthers.
Thank you, Emma, very much for that introduction. You know, it's a great honor and privilege for me to serve as the 37th Attorney General of Colorado. As Emma indicated, I've had the distinct privilege of serving as a local district attorney down in Colorado Springs, elected, as the presidentially appointed United States Attorney, and now as your Attorney General. I like to tell all my legal friends I feel like I've won the legal trifecta. For a lawyer interested in public service, it really doesn't get any better. I want to thank the Business School and Professor Reed for the invitation to join you and to address what I think is a particularly important group of people. You know, I give a lot of speeches. I give maybe 5 to 10 speeches a week. Some of the groups are larger than others. Some of the groups are a little more influential than others. But let me tell you why I consider this a very important group. I suspect that present in this room right now are people who will undoubtedly be an important part of the future leadership of the business community in Colorado. And I think it's tremendous that, one, you're part of this excellent program at the Monfort School of Business, nationally recognized program. And I think it's tremendous that you've showed up today to talk about the issues of ethics in business. And that's, as I understand it, you've come together to discuss the need for ethics in business in the marketplace. And while business ethics is always an appropriate topic, I think your timing is particularly excellent because our country is in yet another meltdown of business ethics, during which many corporate executives have clearly put short-term personal gain ahead of the long-term interests of their shareholders. And we've got investment managers simply defrauding their investors. This comes only a few years after the accounting profession was front and center in corporate scandals in which quarterly revenue projections were often achieved by highly questionable accounting. As U.S. Attorney here in Colorado, I began the investigation of Quest Communications and several of its executives. That resulted in the restatement of $2.5 billion in revenue and, of course, the eventual conviction of several Quest executives, including the CEO, Joe Nacho, who as of next Tuesday is headed to federal prison. My experience in that case, and frankly others that we're involved in right now, provide interesting glimpses into the stark reality that greed remains one of our most prolific deadly sins. I've been a prosecutor. I've been practicing law for 32 years, 18 of those as a prosecutor. And one of the observations I have reflecting back on that is that the methods by which people perpetrate crimes change a lot. their motive for perpetrating those crimes don't change at all. I've written histories of the various offices I've managed, and I find it interesting. My office used to be involved in cattle rustling cases and all that kind of stuff. We don't do that anymore. When I became a prosecutor in 1977, there was not a crime of computer fraud or computer theft on the books of the state of Colorado. Now a large part of what we do has to do with manipulation of computers and the internet and things like that. So the means and methods by which people commit crimes change dramatically. In fact, it's been fascinating for me to watch the same scams that I used to prosecute as a young deputy district attorney back in 1980. They take the exact same scam and put it into the modern age and the internet, but the techniques are basically the same. It's just it's delivered a little differently. And the bottom line is that there's a few basic vices which will always plague mankind, and we got to get used to it. And greed is one of the largest. Pride is another one. And I like to tell stories about the extent to which lust has motivated some of the more interesting criminal conduct that I've run across in my career. I'll leave it to the business executives and the professors that you've heard from today to talk about specific ethical dilemmas that you may face in the business world. And I'm going to spend my time talking in some generalities about what I've learned about business and professional ethics in the 32 years I've been practicing law, including, as I said, 18 as a prosecutor on the local, state, and federal level. As I hope you've already learned, even for the students here in your young lives, an ethical atmosphere in any environment, including the workplace, the marketplace, and the corporate suite, requires people who exercise ethical leadership. And as I hope you've already learned, effective, constructive leadership is done by people of good character. I hope that you've already learned in your young lives that the concept of good leadership and character are largely inseparable. I guess that I could hypothesize a scenario where a person of poor character could, on the basis of his own self-interest, assume a constructive leadership role on a short-term basis and be effective. But it's apparent to me, based on my experience, that sustained good leadership in a position of high responsibility is typically the province of people of good character. So I'd like to spend a few moments this afternoon discussing ethical leadership and the role of character in such leadership. You know, much is being said about the topic of character these days, and many suggest, and I have to admit, I believe with some good reason, that America faces a crisis of character. One of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had occurred the last several years. It involved a small group I belonged to of Catholic lawyers. And we did a 6-month study of character using a variety of historical readings on the topic. And I came away from that experience with a belief that there's so much to be learned about the subject of leadership and character from the wisdom of those who have gone before us. So in exploring the topic of leadership and character today, I'd like to share with you two closely related concepts, neither of which are new with me, neither of which are new, I should say, and neither of which originate with me. The first is the concept of the virtuous citizen, first discussed by Greek philosophers, and secondly, the concept of obedience to the unenforceable, a phrase first coined by an English judge named John Fletcher Moulton about 90 years ago. I believe these concepts are extremely pertinent to a discussion of character and leadership in the 21st century. In fact, I do not believe that an American, blessed to live in a nation which affords tremendous personal freedom, can be a person of good character without being a virtuous citizen who is obedient to the unenforceable. So let me explain. For those of you who've taken a little political science, taken a political theory class, what I'm about to say will sound familiar. Since the days of Plato and Aristotle, 3,000 years ago, our greatest thinkers have understood that effective self-governance is wholly dependent upon a law-abiding citizenry, what those political theorists called a virtuous citizenry. Now, I understand that the word virtue is a word that may make some of you nervous. It may conjure in your mind images about the sanctity of St. Francis of Assisi or Mother Teresa of Calcutta. That's not what I'm talking about. Very few of us can achieve that sort of virtue. No, the term virtuous citizen, as the Greeks used it, was a political term. A virtuous citizen is simply someone who acts responsibly in their own self-interest and the interest of their family and in the interest of their community as a whole. The virtuous citizen exercises both civic and personal responsibility. As I indicated, America's form of government, to be effective, requires that the vast majority of its citizens be virtuous in that context. If you'll reflect for a moment, that's not necessarily the case with other forms of government. The continued existence of a dictatorship may depend upon the virtue of the dictator, ironically, but not on that of the subjected citizenry. So too, a successful monarchy depends upon the virtue of the monarch. But in a free society, such as ours, virtuous citizens in the legislature, the executive branch, the judiciary, the voting booth, the classroom, the corporate suite, the job site, the church pulpit, and every place else are absolutely essential. And to the extent that our American society today is not virtuous enough, in the term that I use it, in the context in which I use it, the political framework of our society and the integrity of its marketplace are threatened. The institutional structure of the United States, as engineered by the founding fathers of this country, is wholly dependent upon civic virtue on the part of its lawmakers and its law enforcers. And it will degenerate beyond recognition if civic virtue is not continually nurtured and celebrated. Plato said that, quote, "The community suffers little if its cobblers have become degenerate and pretentious, but if the guardians of the law and of the state, who alone have the opportunity to bring good government and prosperity, become a mere sham, then the community is ruined." Aristotle pointed out that the key to producing virtuous citizens is to teach children habits of the heart. That's what he called it, teaching children habits of the heart. Virtuous citizenry and ethical behavior learned early in life become a matter of habitual reflex rather than premeditated action. And I hope I don't offend anyone here today by asserting that it's really too late to begin teaching ethics to people in college. I think it's very constructive to talk to undergraduates and graduate students about the situations in which they'll be confronted with ethical dilemmas in the business world. But I have to tell you from my experience, people's inclinations to be ethical or unethical have largely been determined before they enter college. Virtuous citizens do the right thing because it's the right thing, regardless of whether anybody notices. And therein lies an excellent segue into this closely related concept of obedience to the unenforceable. And if you don't take anything out of here today about anything I say, remember that term, obedience to the unenforceable, because it is ultimately the essence of character and the essence of ethics. In his writings, John Fletcher Moulton divided human action into three domains. First is the domain of the law, where he said our actions are prescribed by laws binding upon us, which must be obeyed. If we do not, the government will impose whatever consequences are necessary to coerce obedience. If you commit murder or other serious crimes, the government will send you to jail. Society will not tolerate our violation of the law. That's the domain of the law. The other extreme is the domain of free choice, which Moulton said includes all those actions as to which we claim and enjoy complete freedom. No one suffers much consequence by the choices we make. No one cares much if you choose Colgate rather than Crest to brush your teeth in the morning, or whether you choose to wear a red tie or a blue dress rather than a blue tie or a red dress. But in between, Lord Moulton identified a domain in which our actions are not determined by the law, but in which we should also not be free to behave in any way we choose because of the consequences of our actions to ourselves and to those around us. In this domain, we act with greater or lesser freedom from constraint on a continuum, which extends from one extreme of consciousness of duty, which is nearly as strong as the written law, to the other extreme, which is viewed as simply good form, appropriate in a given situation. Now, examples of actions on this continuum would include such serious infractions as adultery, no longer an act of criminal offense in Colorado or elsewhere, but an act which has significant ramifications. Or lying about your age to get into a movie, or surreptitiously using your friend's ski pass so that you don't have to pay to go skiing. Seemingly not matters of much consequence, but ones that are ultimately at the root of good character. Lord Moulton considered this area of action lying between the law and pure personal preference to be the domain of obedience to the unenforceable. The obedience in this domain is the obedience imposed by a man or a woman upon themselves and not by any external authority. While Moulton recognized that all three domains are necessary in the life of every individual, he identified obedience to the unenforceable as that which is necessary for a free society to flourish and become great. He points out that the more civilized and enlightened a community of people are, the greater their dependence on the voluntary respect and support of the people for law and civil order. Ultimately, the rule of law depends upon the morality of the people. Obedience to the unenforceable is required to give the rule of law the power of enforcement, which is its essential character. It is typically in the domain of obedience to the unenforceable where business ethics lives or dies. I want to emphasize to that, yes, there's the domain of the law impinging upon the business world, and if you cross that domain of the law, you suffer the fate of a Joe Nacho, and you go to prison. But the fact of the matter is, decisions are made day in and day out in the business world where it's not the domain of the law, but the domain of obedience to the unenforceable that really counts. Because although people on the outside may not be watching, people on the inside are watching, and you're creating an ethic and a culture for your organization. As I say, while some business decisions are ultimately dealt with in the domain of the law, what makes a business environment truly ethical is the domain of the unenforceable. John Silber, S-I-L-B-E-R, who was then the president of Boston University, in a 1995 commencement address, suggested that there was a serious decline in obedience to the unenforceable in modern America. And he believes, and I think there's a lot of reasons to believe he's right, that television is the force most responsible for the decline. He suggested that television has become the most important educational institution in the United States and believes that the mores portrayed on primetime television have reinforced the notion that because no formal consequence attaches to various social and antisocial and unethical behaviors, the formative potential of church, family, and school to develop virtuous citizens has been seriously eroded. For example, and I realize some of this does not have a bearing on the business world, but I do think it is pertinent to what's going on in television today. Silber pointed out that when only 1 in 7 sexual encounters on primetime television occurs between married persons, the clear message is that sexual conduct outside of marriage is now the norm and that little or no consequences attach to this breach of an unenforceable moral code. Much the same can be said about lying and cheating on television. He who pulls off the best scam is often portrayed positively rather than demonized. Silber is convinced, and I suggest we should all be, that the future of our country, our future happiness, and that of our children depends decisively on whether we as individuals and collectively as a people have the fortitude to resist unhealthy cultural trends, to nurture civic virtue, and to practice obedience to the unenforceable. In my opinion, the great challenge of America's third century is to reestablish in our families, our churches, and our schools an understanding on the part of each of us of the extent to which the survival of our great nation depends upon the virtue of its citizenry. And I use that in the context of a political term. If families, schools, and churches succeed in producing virtuous citizens, our corporate suites and our marketplaces will also be populated with them. And we cannot allow ourselves to become too pessimistic. You know, Americans have traditionally shown a great capacity for self-renewal. This nation is full of good people and good families. While the social problems we face may seem immense and overwhelming, historically speaking, they're somewhat normative. And I assure you that each one of us can be a part of the solution. In fact, we must be part of the solution, for in the words of Edmund Burke, evil will flourish if good men and women do nothing. A community is virtuous when the individuals who comprise it are virtuous. A well-ordered personal life promotes a well-ordered family life, and a well-ordered family life promotes a well-ordered community and state. A well-ordered personal life also promotes a well-ordered business and professional life. And of course, a well-ordered business life promotes a well-ordered marketplace. The solution begins with each and every one of us doing everything we can in our own world, in our own jobs, in our own churches, in our own schools, and most importantly, in our families, to promote civic virtue and obedience to the unenforceable. As I said at the beginning, I have every reason to believe that sitting in this room right now are future leaders in a wide variety of human endeavors, particularly in the business world. And I beseech each of you to strive to be a virtuous citizen yourself, to be persons of strong character, to be leaders, to be good ethical examples, and to constantly strive at whatever role you assume to create a better community. And I wish you all the very best of success in meeting whatever challenges you face along the way. So thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm going to stop now and take any questions you have. And while this has been kind of a philosophical discussion of ethics, I encourage you to ask me about cases, what's going on in the world, and all that sort of thing. So let's have some questions. Yes, sir.
Do you feel as though the legal environment has been able to keep up with business practices and scams that are beginning to pop up?
I think they're always late. And I think that's kind of inherent in the deal. And I also think there's a temptation to overregulate, not recognizing that ultimately this is a matter of character and ethics. And if you have persons of bad character, they're going to find a way to implement their greedy impulses or the prideful impulses and stuff like that. And I would cite to you the scandal that I said occurred several years ago, 2000, 2002 framework, where we had all this accounting chicanery that led to the demise of companies of the stature of Arthur Andersen. And of course, ironically enough, Arthur Andersen wound up going out of business for a conviction that was subsequently overturned. But I guarantee you, if you look, it was Arthur Andersen who was doing the accounting for Quest and several others that were involved in this this quarterly revenue puffing. Let me just, I'll get to the essence of your question, but what was going on there? This is a very simplified description in Quest. This was a company that had started out buying railroad rights of way and things like that, and got into the internet big time and started buying fiber optic capacity. And they and other companies, Global Crossing and others, bet on a rate of growth that, despite the amazing growth that occurred, wasn't what they had bet on. And they wound up with a great deal of excess fiber optic capacity. And when push came to shove, and Qwest had some very profitable performances over a couple of years, things were turning down. What they did is they started literally swapping this fiber optic capacity with each other. So Qwest would sell fiber optic capacity to Global Crossing for $500 million, and the transaction would literally be completed at 11:45 p.m. on the night before the end of the quarter. And once again, simplistically speaking, they would book the $500 million in revenue that they were taking in, and they would cost out over time the $500 million in cost, and all of a sudden they had this remarkable piece of one-time revenue on their books. And if they were careful enough in kind of disguising that in the whole thing, it took a long, long time. In fact, one would argue that the Wall Street analysts never really figured out what they were doing until the house of cards collapsed. So what happens as a result of that? We go out and we pass the Sarbanes-Oxley. And I don't work with Sarbanes-Oxley every day, but I'm sure your professors talk to you about it, and they talk to people in the business world about it. And the fact of the matter is there's an incredible amount of money being spent by companies who are operating ethically and legally, and that money is being passed on in costs and to make up for these dirty deeds that were taking place. Obviously, we needed a great deal more accountability among corporate boards. They weren't watching the hen house. Corporate lawyers and corporate accountants. We have primarily accountants, students as I understand it in here. Let me tell you one of the smoking gun. Lawyers talk about the smoking gun as the unbelievable piece of evidence. Let me tell you about a smoking gun in the Qwest case. It was emails between a Arthur Anderson partner and a Arthur Anderson, I don't know what you'd call him, field guy, out doing work for Qwest. And this person was expressing a great deal of concern back to the partner about the accounting that was taking place over these fiber optic capacity swaps. And he says to the partner something to the effect, I just don't understand this. Can you give me some reasons why this is okay? You know what the response was? All it said was, I can give you 8 million reasons. Guess what their fee was? $8 million was the accounting fee that was being charged for the work they were doing. That was a smoking gun. Basically saying, we're going to overlook what is questionable accounting, and there's 8 million reasons for doing so. Then after the bad deeds are done, we move in, we do something in the regulatory environment, and I think we're slow to learn that the way to solve this problem is to, I realize my role in the world is to be a prosecutor and I have a certain perspective, but there's nothing more. I found that the deterrence value of sending a white-collar criminal to prison is 10 times what it is sending a street criminal to prison. And Judge Quammen of the Weld County District Court, I think, will back me up. White-collar people dread the notion of going to prison. I assure you, Joe Naccio is not sleeping a wink, even though he's going to go to a white-collar prison. Whereas a lot of our street crime folks who used to visit their dad in prison aren't nearly as intimidated by the prospect. So I think you really have to shake these things up. Unfortunately, it tends to occur in waves. We tend to have a rash of corporate scandals every couple of years. And what it is, it kind of backs up what I was saying. People adjust to what the new regulatory environment is, and then they start finding creative new ways to do their mischief. But ultimately, one of the things I'm hoping will happen, and I keep waiting for it, I'm hoping that shareholders will start rising up about corporate compensation and things like that. Why was Joe Nacho pumping these quarterly revenues? Anybody? He had stock options that he needed to keep pumped above certain prices. And in 20 months, he pocketed $280 million. Keeping that price up there was very lucrative. That was the incentive. And as long as we're tolerating that kind of incentive, we're going to have people reacting the way they are. Now, having said that, I gave the professor a copy of a book there, and one of the chapters is somewhat critical of my state AG compatriots who tend to dream up their jurisdiction to interfere in corporate life. Elliot Spitzer sued the New York Stock Exchange, which most people thought was a public entity. It's not, because he thought they were paying their chairman too much. And long after Elliot Spitzer was governor and subsequently scandalized out of office, the New York court said, oh, by the way, New York Attorney General, you don't have any jurisdiction in this matter. So I don't think, we ought to be able to police, if you will, executive compensation and stuff like that. I don't think that's the job of the criminal law or the civil law for that matter. But I think boards of directors and shareholders need to start policing a lot of these things that give the incentives to this untoward conduct. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about corruption in businesses and stuff. Have you ever had to deal with it in the government side? Have you guys making ethical decisions? Is that wrong for you at all?
Do I make ethical decisions?
There's corruption in business going on. Has there been any on the government side?
There's always corruption in government. I will tell you unabashedly, and I mean this very seriously, you are lucky to live in Colorado in that regard. Any of you from New Jersey? Okay. Here we got New Jersey. Not Camden, I hope, or you're from Camden. Okay, well, she will explain that the last 7 mayors of Camden have gone to prison. It's a culture, and that's what we find around the United States. You find the same thing in Rhode Island and things like that. We have, relatively speaking, very clean government. I'll tell you a funny story in that regard. When I was the United States Attorney, the Justice Department used to come around and audit our offices every 2 years. And then they give a report to D.C. about the performance of our office. In fact, that was a big part of the scandal that took place where the Bush administration had fired these U.S. attorneys. And the vast majority of them, 7 out of the 8, were perfectly willing to go quietly because, heck, it's a political appointment. The president can appoint them and they can remove them. But the Deputy Attorney General, a guy named Paul McNulty, when he gets summoned over to the Senate Judiciary Committee and said, why did you do this? He didn't have the guts to look Senator Schumer in the eye and say, because we could. Because that's the real answer. They could. So what did he say? Remember what he said? Performance problems. Well, 6 of these 8 U.S. attorneys had marvelous audits. They said, what do you mean performance problems? Then they got defensive and they said, oh no, baby, they didn't fire me for performance. And that's really how this thing snowballed. But anyway, so they come around and they audit me. And on the last day of the audit, they sit down and they said, boy, Mr. Suthers, your employees love you. You've really done good work here, but you don't have enough corruption cases. And I said, what do you mean? We bagged the sheriff in Telluride for selling drugs. And I cited a few little things like that. I was really proud of that kind of stuff. They said, you don't have any construction kickback cases? And I said, you know, I'm sorry. I hope you're not going to think I'm really naive, but we don't have mayors in Colorado taking construction kickbacks. I said, what was the last office you audited? Well, they just left New Jersey. And, you know, literally, it's just a way of life. So the bottom line is, yeah, we investigate governmental corruption. I will tell you, the way government systems work and the way compensation works in the government, it's really hard to have a Joe Nacho-like scandal. Nobody's got a temptation to pump revenue figures to make $280 million in the government. So it tends to be. We had a employee of the Department of Revenue embezzle $10 million. That was pretty exciting. They were in the income tax refund department, and instead of sending the refunds out to the taxpayer, they were pocketing the money and destroying any record of the fact that the taxpayer was entitled to the refund. So yeah, these vices, there is no part of the population that is immune to greed, pride, and other such cardinal sins. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was going to sort of, the students and others are hearing a lot about bad apples throughout the course of the day. Is it fair to say that a fairly significant percentage of our society is virtuous, as you've described, or is it fair to say that most of us are not? And politically and in corporate America as examples.
My personal feeling, and this is just a personal observation. First of all, the vast majority in the corporate suite, in the business workplace, are acting ethically. Some of them are, in my opinion, overly driven by the domain of the law, as opposed to simply saying we're doing this because it's the right thing. I do think that an ethic has creeped into the to America, and not just America, but the world. And I do, you know, I would encourage you to kind of analyze primetime television sometime. Not just the sex, but the the ethical decision making that is taking place. And it's really not a very pretty picture. I think we're celebrating celebrity way too much in this country. More kids know who Britney Spears is than Bill Gates. There's no question about that. And I don't think we've got an appropriate emphasis in our families, our churches, and our schools on this ethical development as virtuous citizens. Yeah, everybody's not corrupt and all that kind of stuff, but I see just an incredibly I spoke at a high school to a group of high school seniors about ethics, maybe 6 months ago, and I posed a question to them that I referred to in here. Is it okay to lie to get into a movie for cheaper, or is it okay to swap, take a ski pass and help your buddy get in for free? I was impressed. I was impressed by their honesty. I wasn't impressed by their answer. The vast majority said it was okay. And you know what? And I said, how can you say that? They charge too much for movies. They charge too much to go skiing. And I said, is anybody making you go? No, but that's what we do. We ski. We go to movies. And if they're charging too much, then it's not a bad thing for us to cheat or lie to get in. And I hate to tell you, I think that is a fairly common ethic among young people today. It scares me to death. Now, I do think people grow out of it. But I still think that too many people wind up being motivated by the domain of the law as opposed to the domain of obedience to the unenforceable.
Do you believe that the punishments are really fitting the crimes that are being committed today? I mean, what did Nacho get? 6 years and $75 million in fines, something like that?
Yeah. Nacho got 6 years $75 million in criminal fines, and there's civil cases winding their way through the system that will probably leave him a mere millionaire.
Does that kind of a punishment seem to be a
Yeah.
deterrent?
Yeah, it does. Trust me. It's one of the things I've observed. You don't need to send. There are people in our society you need to send to prison for public safety purposes because they might hurt people if they're out of prison. You don't send the Joe Nachos to prison for public safety purposes. Joe Nacho's not going to beat up people in his neighborhood or all that kind of stuff. You send Joe Nacho to prison for one of the elements of punishment is retribution and deterrence. We're sending you to prison for 6 years as retribution for what you've done, but more, we want to send a message not only to you specifically, but all these folks in general. And I think corporate executives going off to prison for 6 years is a huge deterrent to people in the boardroom. I really do. Now, one of the downsides of Sarbanes-Oxley and some of the stuff that's going on, there's a lot of very qualified people that are being extremely reluctant to get on boards because of the heightened accountability. And that's one of the things I fear. We shouldn't leave corporate boards to the leftovers, people who are, not concerned by, what kind of regulatory environment the law is imposing on them. So it's a balancing act. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
With the economy the way it is right now, are you seeing a large number of fraud cases come through?
Yeah. Not necessarily in the super white-collar area, but these guys are white-collar in the sense that obviously it's not a violent crime. And let me tell you, this is another manifestation of the extent to which we kind of celebrate the scam artist. These folks are very smart, including hackers and all that kind of stuff. And every time I see one of these people doing such damage on the internet, I think to myself, my gosh, we could just channel this brilliance and this intelligence in a way that would be constructive. But a lot of them are in it for the, they just get this vicarious thrill out of the scam. But they're entrepreneurial. That's what's amazing. They're truly entrepreneurial people. They can adjust on a dime. They adjust from national crisis to national crisis. Hurricane Katrina occurs. They're set up the next day with a fraudulent charity, calling people, internet contacting people, asking for contributions to help out the folks at Katrina, and they're out there before Bill Clinton and George Bush Sr. can get together and speak for the Red Cross and all that kind of stuff, and they've pocketed millions and millions of dollars by the time the legit charities are up and running. What are they doing now? Advanced fee schemes for employment. We've got 8.5% unemployment nationally, 7.5%, 8% in Colorado. People are desperate. They're advertising for $300 will find you a job. They neglect to tell you that asking for an advance fee for employment placement is illegal in Colorado. They can only get their fees out of like the first month's paycheck, or the employer pays the fee, stuff like that. But a lot of people are falling for it right now, and they adjust it on a dime. One of the things we've been battling nationwide, you may have got one of these calls. They come in the form of a robocall, and they said, your car warranty is expiring, and you can extend your warranty with a payment of $150. If you want to do it, press 1. And the problem that we're having is we can trace the calls to this place, but then they set up this call line through communications from another state, and we got to go to about 5 or 6 different states to find out who they are. And it's all done intentionally, and they're very, very smart people, constantly adjusting. So the answer to your question is yes. They're taking advantage of just by changing their schemes a little bit. Yes, sir.
The economy the way it is right now, how do you feel about more companies that it's not, the money isn't even staying in the United States?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
I'm a free market guy, more so than a lot of my fellow AGs. I applaud Walmart for figuring out how to get lower prices to you. It's an amazing, amazing operation. And what you find out, and I realize communities have to say, oh my gosh, we want a lot of smaller businesses. That will be a better environment than having a super Walmart and stuff like that. But ultimately, I think the marketplace prevails. And somebody's going to have to find niches where people who don't like to go to Walmart will go other places. But and I'm also, and keep in mind, this isn't really part of my job in terms of I'm not making policy as to whether we're offshoring too many jobs and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's absolutely inevitable that companies are going to go the places where they can get their parts manufactured the cheapest, they can get their service done the cheapest, and ultimately, every time you turn on that Sony television of yours, you remember what a great deal you got on it because of the worldwide free market. I guarantee you, no matter how tough you think you're going to be in buying American or things just simply made in America or all that kind of stuff, it's virtually impossible to do. Yeah.
Okay, you said that you applaud Walmart for their practices and how they've gone to do that, but this is about like ethics, and Walmart's like such an unethical company. They have bad practices and stuff. So.
Well, tell me why Walmart's an unethical company.
Well, they kind of, to get lower prices, they're scamming the companies that are making it to, you know, to sell it to them for cheaper so they can sell it to us for cheaper, but yet...
They're scamming the companies?
Not necessarily.
Or are they going to them and saying, we are the biggest purchaser in the world, and by the way, they're doing this with their legal fees too. Walmart has what we call buying power, and to the extent that they, grab a certain market share, that they're able to take advantage over and above just their, where their talent got them, so to speak. Then it's an issue for antitrust regulators like me. But the defining markets when you're dealing with Walmart is a very interesting question. But what Walmart's doing, whether it be to lawyers or toothpaste suppliers, they're going out there and said, do you want to be a customer of ours? Then you've got to sell it for a certain amount, or we'll go someplace else. Well, I don't find that unethical in the free marketplace. I don't find it now. If they're trying to evade minimum wage laws or something like that, that's a whole other issue. But the fact that they have a pay scale that allows them to be able to produce prices that cause people to come in, I don't find that unethical. Some people may, but I think that's the marketplace for the most part. Yeah.
Do you think the economic crisis right now has anything to do with the world kind of blaming this for overconsumption?
That's a very good question, because let me give you an example. Let's talk about our foreclosure crisis. I think that the root of the problem is best intentioned government policy. Are we dealing with fraud? Yeah, we're dealing with fraud. But let me tell you what my view of what's gone on in this incredible real estate meltdown and foreclosure crisis. 50 years ago, less than 40% of Americans owned the place they lived in. And let's face it, it's the American dream to own the place you live in. Our politicians and our government said, we want to encourage people to own the place they live in, to achieve the American dream. And they started implementing government policies to promote that. And what's happened is some of those policy decisions came back to haunt us. Let's talk about what's happened. Today, 70% of Americans own the place they live in. Have we achieved that tremendous growth in home ownership because we're saving more money than our parents or grandparents? Absolutely not. We're ludicrously bad savers in contrast to past generations. We've done it for one simple reason. Credit is easier to get. That's largely a result of government policy. We had this market, and once again, these are simplifications, and some of your professors are going to be rolling their eyes that it is a lot more complicated than this, but let me give you kind of the... we had, promoting this home ownership, we had this subprime world arise in a big way last 10, 15 years. All these creative lending packages. But one of the things that ultimately got us in trouble, once again as a result of government policy, is allowing the person making the loan to quickly get out from under any liability for that loan. You know, what we're talking about here, selling all these bad loans into these pools that investors were buying and all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, that was government policy. People could make loans, and brokers go out there and hook people into loans without having any concern about that loan coming back on them. Imagine what an incentive that is to be lending to people who aren't creditworthy. And this could float along for a certain period of time as long as real estate was appreciating at a rate where when you started getting in trouble, you could go back in and refinance, get some more equity out of your home and refinance and things like that. But when real estate isn't appreciating, that balloon burst. And we're in a shakeout period right now. Now, was it greed or any lack of ethics? I don't think so. I think it was Congress trying to take care of their constituents and pursuing, you know, what they thought was a proper policy to promote home ownership. Now, is there a bunch of fraud out there? You bet. I mean, let me just briefly tell you the 3 areas that we found incredible amounts of fraud. Advertising. My office has brought 24 Colorado Consumer Protection Act cases against people who are advertising lending packages in a fraudulent way. And most of them right in the mortgage marketplace in the Denver Post and former Rocky Mountain News. Document fraud. Brokers out there making tremendous amounts of money through document fraud, making non-citizens citizens, making non-income earners income earners, things like that. And then we've got this plethora of creative schemes. I was just talking to the Greeley Tribune about one of them where these guys, 10 people, go out and buy like 100 distressed properties. And they would go to mortgage companies and say, as part of the loan, we want you to lend us enough money to accomplish the fix-up. You know, we're going to fix these babies up. We're going to sell them for lots of money, cash out your loans, all this kind of stuff. Well, and they would go either with invoices for work done or with estimates from companies. All the companies were shells of the 10 people that were in the scam. They didn't really exist. And they pocketed $1 million and never made a single loan payment off that front end part of the loans. So there's all kinds of greed, there's all kinds of nastiness going out there, but I don't, you know, the things that have led to this, it was some of the best intentioned actions of government that happened in hindsight to be wrong.
You said you're all for free market. How do you feel about the government bailing all these companies out that can't even cut it anymore?
Not very good.
Even though it's going to destroy so many jobs and ruin...
Yeah, you know, I understand why they're doing it, and I don't on a case-by-case basis. But my personal, as a regulator, the term "too big to fail" gives me the creeps. If they're too big to fail, we should have broke them up under antitrust laws, in my opinion. And you know, you can make a good case for the fact that the United States has not been doing its job over the last couple of decades in the antitrust area. And to allow AIG, for example, to get that big, that it had that portion of the market, I think there are some serious gaps in our antitrust enforcement. I would prefer that there's no company around that's too big to fail for their own bad decisions. Yeah.
What do you think the ethical effect will be of us seeing that current administration is struggling to pay their taxes? There's been numerous cases that they haven't. Do you think that'll be an ethical effect to us as well?
Well, I'm not sure what you're saying. The fact that
like the Kansas senator, mayor,
yeah.
Do you think that'll be passed on because we see, well, they're not paying their taxes? Is that positive?
You know what that tells me? The IRS code is too damn complicated. And if anybody here doesn't think so, now let me tell you how complex the world is, and I think your professors will back me up on this. That is your livelihood for a lot of you. The complexity of the tax code is your livelihood, and you're going to make tons of money because of it. But it's too damn complicated. I don't know whether some of these people were specifically, cheating on some of this stuff, but I know even the smartest people have a hard time working through the tax code. I'd go to and it gets complicated. I'd go to a flat tax, but I'd still want to, keep a couple of that's the fascinating debate. How many of you think? I don't know if you know it, but they're going to confront legislation to do away with charitable deductions. How many of you think Congress is going to do away with charitable deductions?
Do away with or reduce?
Well, do away with. I mean, that's the front line. Do away with charitable deductions. There's some. You think it's going to happen?
I think it may.
Yeah.
Depending upon how badly the government needs revenue.
Wait till you see. This ain't going to be the high-powered lobbyists getting paid millions of dollars a year. They're going to lobby that one out of existence. That's going to be goodwill. That's going to be tons and tons of little groups in Weld County who depend upon donations. And President Obama, he was confronted with that question at a press conference. Does he really believe that people will, I guess, and this is what you may be referring to, he was referring to a thing that said if you reduce the deduction rate from 38% to 28%, he steadfastly said that will not reduce American philanthropy. I think that's naive. I think that's naive because, as you will find out when you get out there, you're going to have some rich clients who engage in very, very sophisticated and ethical tax planning as a result of the complexity in the tax code, and they care a lot whether the deduction's 38% or 28%. And they're going to be making decisions on whether to make this the contribution here or go invest in an oil well someplace on the basis of what the deduction is. So this is a complicated world we live in, and it makes the challenge to be ethical very difficult. Because, as I think the young man in the red T-shirt perceives, that maybe there's a lack of ethics in saying, let the marketplace do what it may. So these aren't easy questions by any stretch of the imagination, but my hope is that all of you have the foundation. You come to college with ethical leanings, and that you'll explore in college what it takes to be this, virtuous citizen, not Mother Teresa, but a person that just day in and day out makes decisions that are in the best interest of yourself, your family, and the community you live in. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity.